What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actors reaches his breaking point on live television? When respect turns to rage, and a simple interview becomes an unforgettable explosion that left the studio audience in complete shock? Tonight, we're breaking down the moment Christopher Lloyd absolutely lost it on Jimmy Kimmel. And trust me, you need to hear every single word of what went down. Make sure you subscribe and drop a comment below telling me whose side you're on after you hear this whole thing, because this one's going to divide people. So let's set the scene. Christopher Lloyd walks onto the stage to massive applause. The audience is on their feet. This is a legend we're talking about, someone who's given us some of the most iconic performances in cinema history. Jimmy's smiling, shaking his hand, and everything seems perfectly normal. They sit down. The applause dies down, and Jimmy starts with what sounds like a straightforward question. "Christopher, it's great to have you here. You know, I was watching some of your old interviews, and I noticed something interesting. You've been in this industry for decades, but you rarely talk about your process. Why is that?" Lloyd leans back, gives a small smile. "Well, Jimmy, I think the work should speak for itself. I've never been someone who needs to explain every choice I make. The performance is there on screen." Jimmy nods, but there's something in his expression. "Right. But don't you think audiences want to understand? I mean, we live in this era where everyone shares everything. People want that connection." "Connection comes from the work," Lloyd says, his tone still polite but firm. "Not from me dissecting it in interviews." "Interesting," Jimmy says, and there's a pause. "So you're saying you're above that? Above connecting with your audience beyond the screen?" You can see Lloyd's face change slightly. "That's not what I said. But that's kind of what it sounds like," Jimmy continues, leaning forward. "I mean, you won't talk about your process. You keep everything close to the chest. Some people might say that's a little, I don't know, elitist?" The audience gets quiet. Lloyd's jaw tightens. "Elitist? I've spent over 50 years dedicated to my craft. I show up, I do the work, I give everything I have. That's not elitist, Jimmy. That's called being a professional." "Hey, I'm just saying what some people think," Jimmy says, holding up his hands with that casual shrug he does. "You've got to admit, some actors are more accessible than others. They do podcasts, they're on social media, they really engage. And then there's the old guard who kind of, stay in their tower." Lloyd's voice gets sharper. "My tower? I've worked on independent films, big studio pictures, theater, television. I've worked with first-time directors and legends. Don't talk to me about towers." Okay, Jimmy says, but he's got this smirk now. "But come on, you have to see how it looks from the outside. You're this mysterious figure. People barely know anything about Christopher Lloyd the person." "Maybe," Lloyd says slowly, "because Christopher Lloyd the person is not your entertainment. I give you my performances. That should be enough." Jimmy laughs, but it's not a warm laugh. "Should be enough? Man, that is old school. You sound like you're from a different century." "I sound like someone who respects the craft," Lloyd shoots back. "What do you respect, Jimmy? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you respect cheap shots and easy laughs." The audience gasps. You can hear it, that collective intake of breath. Jimmy's smile freezes on his face. Whoa. Christopher, I'm just having a conversation here." "Are you?" Lloyd leans forward now. "Because it feels like you've been trying to bait me since I sat down. Is this what passes for an interview? Now? Little digs disguised as observations?" "I think you're being a little sensitive," Jimmy says, and that's when you can see Lloyd's hands grip the armrests of his chair. "Sensitive? You just called me elitist, implied I'm out of touch, suggested I think I'm above my audience, and now I'm sensitive for responding to that?" Jimmy shifts in his seat. "Look, I'm just trying to have an honest discussion about how the industry has changed." No, Lloyd says, his voice cutting through. "You're trying to make me look bad because that's what you do. You bring people on here, you act friendly, and then you stick the knife in. And everyone laughs because, hey, it's all just jokes, right? Christopher, I think you're misunderstanding the tone here. I understand the tone perfectly, Lloyd says. I've been doing this long enough to know when someone's being genuine and when they're performing. And right now, you're performing. The concerned host, the guy just asking questions. But we both know what you're doing. Jimmy tries to laugh it off. Okay, I think we need to take a breath here. Why? Lloyd asks. Because I'm not playing along? Because I'm not sitting here taking your shots with a smile? You wanted honest, Jimmy. This is honest. The studio is dead silent now. Jimmy looks at his desk, then back at Lloyd. I really didn't mean to offend you. Yes, you did, Lloyd says simply. Every word was calculated. And that's fine. That's your show. But don't pretend it was anything else. Jimmy opens his mouth, closes it, then tries again. I respect your work, Christopher. I always have. Do you? Lloyd asks, and there's genuine curiosity in his voice now. Or do you respect the ratings my name brings? Because there's a difference. Jimmy clears his throat, trying to regain control. Christopher, I think you're reading way too much into this. We have celebrities on here every night, and we have great conversations. Great conversations, Lloyd repeats, almost laughing. Is that what you call it? You know what I call it? I call it a conveyor belt. Bring them out. Ask the same questions. Get them to tell a funny story. Show a clip. Send them off. Rinse and repeat. There's nothing great about it. It's mechanical. Well, that's how talk shows work, Jimmy says, his own edge starting to show now. We have a format. We have a structure. Not everything has to be some deep, profound exchange. No, you're right, Lloyd says, nodding. But it doesn't have to be disrespectful either. It doesn't have to be you taking shots at your guests to get laughs from your audience. When did that become the standard? Jimmy's face is reddening slightly. I don't take shots at my guests. You just did, Lloyd says flatly. Multiple times. In the first 5 minutes of this interview. Or are you going to tell me I imagined the elitist comment? The tower comment? The implication that I'm some out-of-touch relic? I was making an observation about generational differences in the industry, Jimmy says, his voice getting louder. If you can't handle that kind of discussion, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. And there it is. The audience reacts audibly. Lloyd goes very still. Maybe I shouldn't be doing interviews, he repeats slowly. That's your response? That if I don't appreciate being insulted on your show, I should just stay home. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said, Jimmy. Word for word. And you know what? You might be right. Maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe none of us should be here, subjecting ourselves to this just to promote our work. Maybe we should find another way. Jimmy laughs, but it's forced now. Oh, come on, you're being dramatic. This is live television. Things get a little heated sometimes. It's not that serious. Not that serious? Lloyd's voice rises for the first time. My career, my reputation, my life's work, that's not serious to you? Being called elitist on national television isn't serious? I was asking a question. No, you were making a statement disguised as a question. There's a difference, and we both know it. You wanted to get a reaction, and now you're getting one, but suddenly it's too much. I'm being too dramatic? Jimmy tries to pivot. Look, let's just move on. We've got some clips to show. No, Lloyd says firmly. We're not moving on. Not until we address this. You brought me here, you started this line of questioning, and now you're going to sit there and hear what I have to say. The audience is completely transfixed now. Some people are holding up their phones. Jimmy's looking toward his producers off camera, but Lloyd doesn't break eye contact. Go ahead then, Jimmy says, crossing his arms. Say what you need to say. You know what the problem is with shows like this? Lloyd begins. It's not the format. It's not the structure. It's the cynicism. It's the assumption that nothing matters, that everyone's fair game, that you can say whatever you want as long as you smile while you're saying it. And if someone objects, well, they're just being sensitive. They can't take a joke. They're too serious. I make jokes for a living, Jimmy interrupts. That's literally my job. Your job is to interview people, Lloyd counters. The jokes are supposed to be part of it, not the weapon you use against your guests. When did hosts start thinking their job was to take people down? Johnny Carson never did that. Dick Cavett never did that. They elevated their guests. They made people want to be on their shows. You know why? Because they had respect. Jimmy's getting visibly frustrated now. Times have changed, Christopher. Comedy has changed. You can't compare now to some golden age that probably wasn't as golden as you remember. I'm not talking about a golden age, Lloyd says. I'm talking about basic human decency. I'm talking about treating people like people instead of content. Is that really such an outdated concept? You're acting like I attacked you, Jimmy says. I asked you some questions. That's it. You're the one who came out swinging. I came out defending myself, Lloyd corrects him. There's a difference. And the fact that you can't see that? The fact that you think asking loaded questions is somehow neutral? That tells me everything I need to know about where we are as an industry. Jimmy shakes his head. I think you came here with an agenda. I think you wanted to make some kind of statement, and you're using me to do it. Lloyd actually laughs at that. An agenda? Jimmy, I came here to talk about my new project. That's all I wanted to do. You're the one who decided to turn this into something else. You started questioning my approach, my career, my choices. And now that I'm responding, I'm the one with the agenda? You're twisting everything I'm saying, Jimmy argues. No, I'm holding you accountable for what you're saying. And you don't like it. You're used to people just taking it, laughing along, playing their part. But I'm too old and too tired to play those games anymore. The tension in the studio is almost unbearable now. Jimmy's looking genuinely angry. You know what? Maybe you are too old. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you can't adapt to how things work now. The audience gasps again, louder this time. Lloyd's eyes narrow. There it is. The mask comes off. Now we're getting to the real Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy tries to backtrack immediately. That came out wrong. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did, Lloyd says, his voice like steel now. You absolutely meant it like that. And you know what the sad thing is? You probably don't even realize how insulting that is. Not just to me, but to everyone who's dedicated their lives to this craft. The idea that because we don't tweet every thought, because we don't turn our lives into content, because we actually care about the work more than the publicity, somehow we're obsolete. That's not progress, Jimmy. That's decay. Look, I get that you're passionate about this, Jimmy starts, but Lloyd cuts him off. Passionate? I'm furious. I'm furious that I have to sit here and defend the idea that actors deserve respect. I'm furious that quality has been replaced by quantity, that depth has been replaced by sound bites, that actual conversation has been replaced by whatever this is. Jimmy's jaw clenches. This is my show that millions of people watch every night. My show that gives people like you a platform to promote your work. People like me? Lloyd repeats, his voice dangerously quiet. What exactly do you mean by that? Actors? Jimmy says quickly. I meant actors. Don't twist my words. I'm not twisting anything. I'm listening very carefully to every single word you're saying. And what I'm hearing is a host who thinks he's doing his guests a favor by having them on. Like we should be grateful for the opportunity to be mocked on television. Nobody's mocking you, Jimmy insists, but his voice lacks conviction now. Really? Because from where I'm sitting, that's exactly what's been happening since I walked out here. Every question has had an edge. Every comment has had a barb. And when I call you out on it, suddenly I'm the problem. I'm too sensitive. I'm too old. I can't adapt. Tell me, Jimmy, what was your plan here? What did you think was going to happen? Jimmy doesn't answer immediately, and that silence speaks volumes. The audience is completely silent, hanging on every word. You can feel the discomfort radiating through the studio. Finally, Jimmy speaks. I thought we'd have an interesting conversation. I thought you could handle some challenging questions. Challenging questions, Lloyd says, almost laughing. Is that what we're calling it now? Let me ask you something, Jimmy. When was the last time someone challenged you? When was the last time someone sat in this chair and actually pushed back on you? Because I'm willing to bet it doesn't happen often. You're too powerful, too established. People need you more than you need them. So they smile and laugh and play along, even when you cross the line. I haven't crossed any line, Jimmy says defensively. You crossed it the moment you implied I was elitist. You crossed it when you suggested I live in a tower. You crossed it when you questioned my connection with audiences. And you definitely crossed it when you said maybe I'm too old to adapt. Those aren't challenging questions, Jimmy, those are attacks. And the fact that you can't distinguish between the two is exactly the problem. Jimmy's looking around now, clearly uncomfortable with how this is going. I think we should take a commercial break. Of course you do, Lloyd says. That's the easy way out, isn't it? When things get too real, just cut away. Show some ads. Come back with a smile and pretend nothing happened. But we're not taking a break. Not yet. Because I'm not done. Christopher, Jimmy says, his voice strained, this isn't productive. Productive? Lloyd's voice rises again. You want to talk about productive? What's productive about tearing people down for entertainment? What's productive about creating an environment where guests feel attacked? What's productive about this entire approach to interviews, where the host tries to score points off the people sitting across from them? I'm trying to make good television, Jimmy shoots back, his own anger fully surfacing now. I'm trying to create moments that people remember, that people talk about. Sometimes that means pushing buttons. Sometimes that means not just lobbing softball questions. There's a difference between pushing buttons and being disrespectful, Lloyd counters. There's a difference between a tough question and a personal attack. And if you can't see that difference, then you've been doing this job too long, or you were never qualified to do it in the first place. The audience actually gasps at that one. Jimmy's face goes red. Never qualified? I've been doing this for years. I've interviewed hundreds of people. I've won awards for this show. Awards don't make you a good interviewer, Lloyd says. They make you popular. There's a difference. A good interviewer listens. A good interviewer tries to understand their guest. A good interviewer creates a space where people feel comfortable opening up. You don't do any of that. You perform. You work the crowd. You go for the laugh, the clip, the viral moment. And if your guest gets hurt in the process, well, that's just collateral damage, right? That's not fair, Jimmy says, but his voice is shaking now. Fair? Lloyd leans back, and there's something almost sad in his expression now. You want to talk about fair? Nothing about this industry is fair anymore. Nothing about how we treat each other is fair. We've created this culture where everyone's constantly trying to one-up each other, where every interaction has to be content, where nothing is sacred and nothing is off-limits. And shows like this, hosts like you're feeding into it. You're making it worse. Jimmy's silent for a moment, and when he speaks again, his voice is quieter. If you hate it so much, why do you keep doing it? Why do you keep making movies, doing interviews, staying in the industry? Lloyd considers this. Because I still love the work. I love acting. I love storytelling. I love what film and television can be at their best. But I hate what we've allowed the culture around it to become. I hate that I have to sit through interviews like this just to talk about a project I care about. I hate that authenticity has become a liability, and cynicism has become the default. Jimmy looks down at his desk, then back up at Lloyd. So what do you want from me? An apology? You want me to say I'm sorry for how I conduct my show? I don't want anything from you, Jimmy, Lloyd says, and there's a weariness in his voice now. I stopped expecting anything from this the moment I sat down and realized what kind of interview this was going to be. What I want is for people watching this to understand that this isn't normal. This isn't how it has to be. We've normalized cruelty disguised as humor. We've normalized disrespect disguised as honesty. And somewhere along the way, we forgot that the people sitting in these chairs are human beings, not just content for your show. I've never thought of my guests as just content, Jimmy says, but it sounds hollow. Haven't you? Lloyd challenges. Then why does every interview feel the same? Why does every guest get the same treatment? You've got your formula, your beats, your moments you're trying to create. But where's the humanity in that? Where's the actual connection? Jimmy's quiet for a long moment. When he speaks, there's something different in his voice. You know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe I do rely too much on the formula. Maybe I do go for the easy laugh instead of the real conversation. But you know why? Because that's what works. That's what gets ratings. That's what keeps this show on the air. And that makes it okay? Lloyd asks. Success justifies everything? In this business? Yeah, kind of, Jimmy says. And there's a brutal honesty to it now. If I don't get ratings, I don't have a show. If I don't have a show, I don't have a career. So I do what works. I give people what they want. What they want, Lloyd echoes, or what you've trained them to want. Because I think audiences are smarter than you give them credit for. I think they'd actually appreciate something real, something genuine. But they can't want what they're never offered. Jimmy shakes his head. You're living in a fantasy world if you think people want slow, thoughtful conversations. They want quick, they want entertaining, they want shareable. That's the reality of modern media. Then maybe modern media is broken, Lloyd says simply. Maybe we've optimized for all the wrong things. Maybe in our rush to give people what they want, we've forgotten to give them what they need. And what's that? Jimmy asks, and there's almost a challenge in it. Substance, Lloyd says. Authenticity. Moments that actually matter instead of moments designed to go viral. Conversations that leave people thinking instead of just laughing. Is that really so radical? Jimmy spreads his hands. In this environment? Yeah, kind of. Look around, Christopher. Everything is content now. Everything is designed to be consumed and forgotten. That's not just talk shows, that's everything. Movies, TV shows, music, news. We're all playing the same game. Then maybe it's time someone stopped playing, Lloyd says quietly. Maybe it's time someone said enough. Maybe that someone has to be me, right here, right now. The studio is absolutely dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Jimmy's looking at Lloyd with something that might be respect, might be frustration, might be both. So what happens now? Jimmy asks. You walk off? You refuse to finish the interview? You make your big statement? Lloyd thinks about this. No, I'm going to sit here and finish what I came to do. I'm going to talk about my project, about the work that matters to me, about why I still do this despite everything we've just discussed. Because that's what a professional does. They show up, they do the job, even when it's hard. Even when they're frustrated. Even when they'd rather be anywhere else. Jimmy nods slowly. Okay, we can do that. We can talk about your project. But not like before, Lloyd says firmly. Not with the games, not with the angle, not with you trying to get your moment. If we're going to continue this interview, it's going to be respectful. It's going to be real. Can you do that? There's a long pause. Jimmy looks at Lloyd, looks at the audience, looks at the camera. Yeah, he says finally. Yeah, I can do that. And something shifts in the studio. The tension doesn't disappear completely, but it changes. What follows is actually interesting. Jimmy asks genuine questions about Lloyd's new project, and Lloyd answers them thoughtfully. There's no performance, no posturing. Just two people having an actual conversation. It only lasts a few minutes, but those minutes feel different from everything that came before. When it ends, when Lloyd stands to leave, there's applause. But it's not the usual applause. It's something else. Something more complicated. Jimmy shakes Lloyd's hand and neither of them smile. There's an understanding there, an acknowledgement of what just happened. As Lloyd walks off stage, you can see it on his face. Exhaustion, frustration, but also something like satisfaction. He said what he came to say. He didn't back down. He didn't play the game. And whether people agree with him or not, whether they think he was right or wrong, no one can say he wasn't real. That's the moment everyone's been talking about. That's the interview that's been dissected and debated across every platform. Some people think Lloyd was out of line, that he overreacted, that he made a mountain out of a molehill. Others think he was absolutely right, that he said what needed to be said, that someone finally stood up to the machine. But here's what's undeniable. For those minutes on that stage, something real happened. Not manufactured drama, not scripted conflict, but an actual human moment where someone refused to play along, refused to be diminished, refused to let it slide. And in an age where everything feels calculated and controlled, where everyone's performing all the time, that kind of raw honesty is shocking. That's what happens when an actor who's spent decades perfecting his craft, who's given everything to his art, sits down expecting respect, and gets something else entirely. That's what happens when professionalism meets cynicism. That's what happens when someone decides they've had enough. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below. Here's what I want to know from you. Do you think Christopher Lloyd was justified in how he responded, or did he take things too far? Let me know what you think.